just check it's live.
I did bring copies of my books in case. Someone, I was talking earlier before I brought my books. I was like, oh, well, there you go.
Right, it should be loaded, so any second now, as soon as I see it on. Oh, we're on. Oh, your books are on. Look, you just got those in at the start of the chat. You got them straight in there.
Sorry, that looks pretty bad.
I'm supposed to at the end, Sonia. We've got it in right at the start. No worries. Well, firstly, how are you? And thank you for joining us. And yeah, how are things with you and Heads Up? And tell us a bit about what you do.
Yeah, so things are good. I think, every day I try to count my blessings during lockdown and not look at all the things I miss, as I'm sure many people do. So yeah, we're all well, we're all healthy, we're all good at Heads Up. Thank you, and I hope you and your team are too. Just a bit about Heads Up. So at Heads Up, we specialise in helping schools become genuinely outstanding, and we have really great success in helping schools break that barrier between being a good school, sometimes a consistently good school for many, many wonderful years, and we help them break through and actually create a genuinely, sustainably outstanding school.
Amazing. And so tell me more about that, Sonia, because I'm intrigued as to what that looks like. I've worked, as you know, in multiple or numerous schools, and schools that on the face of it look amazing and in my eyes would be outstanding, and I think, why aren't they outstanding? So I guess what makes an outstanding school?
Yeah, it's really interesting what you say, and I agree. Sometimes I think, what's the difference here? And I think that's one of the challenges of being outstanding. What we found in Heads Up is that so many schools become good. And I think that's something we should be really proud of, not like, oh, well, they only got to good or they're stuck at good. Like, actually getting to good is such an achievement, and maintaining it is really hard. But the difference between a good school and an outstanding school is culture. Okay. And the journey to creating a good school is different from the journey to creating an outstanding school. It's a qualitative shift. And often, not often, what we find is that the things that break you through that barrier are all around how high performing your culture is, how strong your culture, how on board everyone is, how you tackle those issues, how aligned you are, which are all features of high performing cultures.
Okay, that's really interesting, because as I said, there's one school that jumps out at me, and I obviously won't say what school it is, but those people that listen to this and who know me might be able to work it out. But it's always been a school that I've held in such high esteem, and it's one of the first schools that I started delivering into 7 years ago as a sports coach when I started out the business. And it was always one that I, as I said, held in really high esteem and thought so highly of. Really enjoyed delivering there, and it's a good school. It still is a good school. And I guess one of the things that I know that they had issues with was attendance and also their attainment level. So are those two things that would sort of a barrier, if you like, to getting to outstanding, or not necessarily?
It's interesting because almost anything can be a barrier in a school, and there are so many. I ask kids all the time, what stops your school being good? And the list is long. I don't believe in silver bullets. I think nothing is that simple. But what high-performing cultures do really well is they're very clear about where they're going, who they are, what they're doing, what excellence looks like, and they're very good at overcoming those barriers because of that entire approach. So absolutely, attainment. I work with typically schools actually in quite challenging areas. It's a lot of our schools are like that. So they've got challenges coming out of their ears, whether it's mobility, it's attainment, it's, even level of parental support, so many things. But it's the approach to the situation, which comes from the culture, that changes it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And is that part of the work then that you do, creating that? I know you call it the good to outstanding model. So can you run us through that and what that looks like?
Yeah, it's based on 2 insights, and it has 3 facets. So the 2 insights are most people haven't been trained in how to create a high performing culture. So sure. About culture and so on, but people aren't trained in actually how you do that. And secondly, is the qualitative shift, as I've already mentioned. So we put 3 key strategies in place. Have a powerful and compelling vision. One that tells people where you're going and why they should follow you, not why aren't you buying into it, but why on earth would you come with me? have the difficult conversations, talk about the tough stuff really effectively, but kindly. It's not about bawling people out, and really grow the strengths of the team. I think what's interesting is that every school is doing every single one of those things.
Okay.
It's the level to which you do them. And if I think about you in the world of sport, you know, and physical activity, you know, I swim.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do stuff that professional swimmers do. Well, I don't swim at the moment, obviously, and probably won't be for a while, but pre-lockdown. You know, I time myself, I do laps, I try and do some faster to build capacity, like a range of things. I've got a heart rate monitor. I think about what I eat, but not that much. I'm not an Olympian though, am I? And yet I'm demonstrating behaviours that a professional athlete would demonstrate, but I'm not an Olympian. So it's the quality of each of those things that really makes a difference, and how well they're done. You can't just bang out a vision and it get you to excellence.
Yeah. And I suppose taking your swimming analogy, you think of Olympians and any other team sport or individual sport. It's not just that individual, is it? So if I wanted to become an Olympian, even if I had all the attributes to do so, I would need people around me to help me realize that dream or that vision. And I guess that's the case with schools.
Absolutely.
And is that where the sort of sharing of, well, not sharing of the vision, but you said sort of taking people on that journey with you? Is that where that comes in?
Yeah, absolutely. To achieve excellence, it's interesting. A lot of schools say, 95% of our team are with us, 95% are. And I hate saying it, but it's like, it needs to be 100 if you want excellence.
Yeah.
Now, imagine if you were playing football and one of your team just doesn't, you know, either doesn't pull their weight or actually isn't able to, despite all the best efforts in the world. You're not going to play a good game, are you?
No, and again, taking it into the sporting analogy, and obviously that's what I can relate to, thinking of tough characters, your mavericks potentially that have fitted into a team culture, but potentially not for that long. Kevin Peterson springs to mind as a cricketer who obviously got England to world number one Test cricket, but then it had a lifespan that he went too far, and then he sort of alienated a few members of the team, and then it had that lifespan. So yeah, I completely take your point. And I know you do some other work, Sonia, on difficult conversations. So is that where that comes into it as well?
Yeah, that's one of the three components. So one of the absolute critical features of a high-performing team is they can talk about the tough stuff well. Yeah. And at high performance, it no longer feels like a difficult conversation. It's just feedback. It's well delivered, it's well received, but you have to get to that place, which often means many difficult conversations, making it very normal. But understandably, most of us don't like difficult conversations, and most of us haven't been effectively trained in how to do them well. So it's a really important part.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that many people that will listen to this have had scenarios where they maybe have thought, I'd love to say this, but I don't feel like I'm confident enough to do it or have that conflict resolution. So is there, like you said, there's no silver bullet, I'm sure, but is there a way to structure these conversations to open them and also, I guess, ultimately to get where you want to get to?
Yes. I always say at the first level, and there are several layers of difficult conversations, but the first level, it's not three, but you need three things in place. So you've got to structure it well, you've got to manage the emotions, and you've got to build trust in the interaction. Yeah. And if you miss any one of those, common problems happen. So, for example, if you don't have a structure, people come away and they haven't heard what you needed them to say. And everybody's experienced that, you know, how could they not understand what I was saying? But they've walked away with it. Emotional management, these conversations are emotionally demanding. And then building trust in the interaction. If I don't believe you really mean what you're saying, then it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter how good your words are. If I think that you don't truly back it up in what you're thinking and feeling about me, then I'm just not going to trust a word you say. So you've got to get those three in place to get into the right zone, to be honest, and you can have great success. I am going to wave this because I've literally written the book.
There you go.
Really, it's a lot of good feedback, but there's a lot in there about all of those components and more.
Yeah, and again, sorry to keep bringing this back to sport, but I'm sort of thinking of things that I've been through in my playing career and my sort of career now as a business owner. And that trust thing you mentioned then really resonates, because I've had some amazing coaches over my football career that I've played underneath, but perhaps weren't the best managers. So they could put on a really amazing coaching session. Everybody's buying into it. They're loving it. And they understand what the coach is trying to get across. But then when it comes to game day, picking a team, not just for one game, but throughout the season, I suppose there always are difficult conversations because it's not always going to be the same people that are playing every week. People are going to be upset if they're not playing. And it's a really tough challenge, I guess, in that scenario to make those difficult decisions, but also maintain trust and respect. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah. Okay, good. I think I'm on the same page as you.
Yeah. Oh, well, do you know what? We have these in our own lives. Trust me, this book is dedicated to my husband.
Right.
He knows everything that's happening. Conversation. It's a life skill, isn't it? But it's a skill that as leaders and managers we can't avoid. And yet, most of the time when I ask a room full of heads or school leaders, how many of you have had training in how to have successful, difficult conversations? 5%, if I'm lucky, if hands go up.
Yeah. And the same for me as I'm sure you as well, as a business owner that had so many difficult conversations over the years, and it's something that I'm better at now than I was at the start. My nature is that I want to please everybody and be liked by everybody, which isn't always possible, right? And I'm sure head teachers experience the same thing.
Yeah.
And is that where they have the vision of where they want the school to be, but those decisions have to be aligned with where they want to take the school?
Yeah, so difficult conversations, I think, become a lot easier once you're clear on your vision and all the component parts that go with it. And it's not just the vision, there are several pieces, because it gives you a really solid framework for all the decisions and actions you make. And I think, I've seen it at this time of crisis. Those schools that I've worked with, who I know who have those pieces in place, they've been able to move through it very easily. And the team have been able to very easily buy into that and understand it. And that level of buy-in is beyond the initial level of buy-in that happens when a crisis kicks in and people naturally rally around the leader.
Yeah.
Once you got past that halo effect that kind of gives you a window of opportunity, if you like, as a leader to kind of move things forward quickly, then the kind of the critiquing kicks in, and it's where you've got those parts in place. Being clear about your vision, values, having difficult conversations, they all line up and support each other.
Yeah. And what would you say to that head teacher, potentially, I don't know, a new head teacher into a new school who maybe knows people but not that well, or similarly a class teacher who's been promoted to a head teacher or head of school who previously had that different relationship with teachers? What would you say to them and their first difficult conversation? How do they go about doing that?
So it's a really nice question, and my advice is very specific to this aspect, if you like. There's a lot of people who also young leaders, young leaders talking to older members of staff who've been teaching a lot longer than they have, and how do they handle it? So two things I'd say. So one is definitely to refer to the role sometimes can be quite useful, not as a shield, but to say that in my role as subject leader, in my role as literacy coordinator, in my role as head of department, I need to ask you too. So that moves away from me being 27 and you being 45, and obviously I'm not 27, but you know what I mean, or me being new and you haven't got that piece. That's a way of just kind of saying that this is what I'm asking because of the role and position of responsibility I hold, not because I've got a vendetta or I'm out to prove anything.
Yeah. And I guess a common comeback would be, well, you've only been doing this job for 5 minutes, or I've been teaching for 20 years longer than you. Who are you to speak to me in that way?
Absolutely. And that's I find really interesting, because that's where the emotional management piece comes in, because what we teach into is a game. And a transfer analysis game. So, I could be quite parental with you, can't I? And say, well, what on earth do you know? How long have you been here? And basically I make you feel like a child when I do that.
Yeah.
Particularly if you are a young leader or you're new to role, and that can then elicit almost childlike behaviours, and you end up in this dynamic. So it's really important to be aware of that and just think, actually, and again, almost take a little bit of refuge in the role. Like, I've earned this role. And it doesn't matter that I'm young, because actually I've managed, my experience, my knowledge. So to kind of go, actually, but in my role, I do need to ask this for you, and it's not unreasonable. And then you take on that professional voice instead of that, oh, and I know, and I'm sorry I have to ask you, and it's really awkward for me too. And I'm pleased ever so much if it's not too much trouble. And I've kind of gone into a child pleasing kind of mode. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it completely does. And I like what you said about in my role as English lead, maths lead, whatever it was. So you're almost using your experience and empathy of being in that scenario. There's a famous, well, cricketer is one of my favourite leaders actually, and he's a New Zealander called Brendon Mccullum, and he transformed the way that New Zealand played Test cricket. And his sort of mantra around the way that he led was leading by the front, but I'm not asking you to do anything that I wouldn't or haven't done myself. So I guess that applies in this scenario as well.
Definitely, definitely. I'd be careful not to wear it out. Any kind of
Yeah,
tool that you use, I think, don't wear it out. So if you start every conversation going, "In my role as," it's just
yeah, yeah,
the thing that you do. Um,
yeah,
just at those times when you think, I do need to point that to the fact that despite my newness or my youth, or even
yeah,
my nervousness, I'm not saying it's not something that
yeah,
a more
yeah.
experienced person might use. You know, they really might. But yeah, to use it there, and I think yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier about that emotional intelligence. It's knowing, I guess, when is the right time to maybe pull that card out, or with which member of staff, and knowing your staff and who's going to respond to which type of leadership, which must be a really tricky skill, especially if you're managing. You've got a three-form entry school with a huge staff team to try and work with each person individually must be really tough. So, is there? Sorry, go on.
No, go on, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, is there a way of managing different people differently, or is it something that you learn as you go along as a leader, as a head teacher?
No, I think this is one of the things that I think saddens me most about difficult conversations. A bit like you know, and don't get me wrong, I don't like having them. I just appreciate the value of them.
Yeah,
You know, and you know, I worked in you know, I was a teacher. I've taught every age from reception to 16, but then I joined the John Lewis Leadership Management Program, and I
yeah,
learned very quickly there that either I was going to have to learn how to do this well, or there was no way I could be a leader or manager because it's really hard to do. Um,
yeah.
and I think that what saddens me is that most people learn by hook and by crook over years, and
Absolutely, yeah,
actually one term and a little bit of training, and you'll be you will improve far more than you will in 5 years by hook and by crook, and just trial and error. And it saddens me when I have head teachers who are a year off retirement who have some of the training that we do or difficult conversations, and they say that's the best training I've ever had in my entire career, and I'm retiring next year. And I wish someone gave that to me when I was at least a deputy head, if not earlier.
yeah,
You don't need that amount. You don't have to learn by trial and error and working it out. There are principles you can put in place that then amplify your experience. It's the
mm,
same when thinking about managing large teams. You know, there are ways you can map them out and ways you can think about them that allow you to approach those things not necessarily perfectly because we're humans, but far
yeah,
much further ahead than you would if we just kind of we learn as we go. And it's that blend of the two things.
yeah,
It's a bit like saying, learn to play football, but I'm not going to give you any tip. There's no training. Just go and learn to play football.
yeah. Off you go.
Imagine you could just have 3 coaching sessions with them. How
Yeah,
much different
yeah,
would they do in a month versus they just go and play football?
yeah. It's
Blend.
really interesting. Yeah, it's fascinating, and I don't know. It wasn't something I planned on asking, to be honest, Sonia. But do you think education's almost left behind a little bit in terms of innovation in this way? So you talk about like leadership and head teachers not being trained in this and not having the experience to handle those difficult conversations. And I'll take it back to this is a little bit of a sidestep, but the wellness, and I know wellness and mental health is a big thing for you as well. That isn't something that schools necessarily do that well either. That the health and well-being of their teachers isn't necessarily at the forefront of people's minds. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, should it be like, should there be more training in the conversations you're talking about for head teachers?
I think they should definitely. I mean, I honestly, I had this epiphany a couple of years ago. Where I thought, God, if we could just do one thing, and we could literally do our day and a half training with every school leader in the country, we would see a shift in the quality of education. Because think of all the
Yeah,
problems
yeah,
and the barriers we'd remove. Um, but I don't think education is behind. And it's a really interesting. I've worked in the public sector and the private sector, you know, as a
yeah,
teacher in John Lewis, back now working in education, have been for the last 10 years with Heads Up. And I think I've been very aware of the kind of the private and the public sector divide.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
business gets everything right and public sector don't. And actually, there's a lot of average. That's what an average is, isn't it? You boil it down. So there are a lot of all right businesses. There are an awful lot of bad businesses as well.
yeah, yeah.
There are thankfully a lot of good schools, and sadly a number of those that aren't good. But what you don't get in any environment, very much of, are exceptional.
Yeah, yeah,
Those break beyond it. Now, I was really lucky. John Lewis is one of those companies that is exceptional, that does think about
sure.
these things. That really, I learned about high performance, and I didn't realize how lucky I was until I started to hear what other people were saying. And I was there thinking, but why aren't you doing that? Surely everyone does that, don't they? But no, the truth is they didn't. So I don't think education's any different. I think there's a level, but actually I think if there's one place we saw excellence, if there's only one area we saw excellence, the place that makes the biggest difference is education.
Yeah, I completely agree. And for us, as you know, our vision is to raise physical activity levels in primary school specifically, but it's not just with primary school children. That's where it starts, right? For us, that's the start of their journey that they then hopefully continue on into adulthood. And the reason that I asked that question was around, you think of like your Googles and your leading companies in the world who have mindfulness breaks and brain breaks, and they walk around the offices, and they have bikes that get to different. I'm not saying a school has the same funding as Google, otherwise, well, they'd be very envious of Google. Let's say that. But I guess my point is they prioritize the wellness and health of their employees, and I'd love to see a bit of a shift with schools as well. And I know teachers' time is very precious, and they obviously, I mean, I'd say precious because I know that the time pressures are huge and doing crazy hours every week. But I'd love that shift for teachers to buy into that healthy ethos that then transcends down to the children, and it becomes this whole culture, like you mentioned, is really important in the school. And then that just stays with not just the children, but the teachers and also the community as well, parents and surrounding community. So that's our vision, I guess, our huge vision that we're trying to get across the schools. So to move on to the next question, and shoehorn it in there again about PE. Is PE, does that play a part in schools' thinking to try and get to outstanding, or is that just part of the culture that they create?
I think where PE absolutely has a place, without a doubt, is that it's part of holistic education. And what you see outstanding schools do, or certainly the ones I've walked into, and I think I know more outstanding heads than anyone else. I'm really willing to be proved wrong on that. Most people haven't walked into that many outstanding schools. I can judge a school in 30 seconds. Accurately, alarmingly accurate. I did it just before lockdown. And they got their phone call from the inspection, and my judgment was absolutely spot on. So I know a lot of outstanding schools. So they're not hothousing their children and focusing on English and maths. Quite the opposite. They've got a very rich, broad career. And of course, PE is fundamental. If you don't look after the physical body, all of that mental health, all of that mental well-being, it's all linked. So that, as well as all the other subjects, there is that breadth. But there's a real acknowledgement of making sure children develop skills that will support them throughout life, and physical well-being is a key part of that. Look how many problems we wouldn't have in society today if we'd all learned we all have better physical health from a young age. And learn to continue that into adult life. Huge.
Massive, yeah. So are you saying that to be an outstanding school, PE should be your number one priority?
Well, I think to be an outstanding school, you've got to get the culture right, and I think it'd be impossible to exclude PE from that. Children's health. How can you be an outstanding school if we're not looking after children's physical health? So
yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't say number one priority.
No, I wouldn't even go to that far myself.
I don't think you can leave it out, and I don't think it should be a poor relation subject. I had a conversation with the head teacher earlier, which I loved, and she told me how a leader had moved on because there wasn't a leadership opportunity at their school, but how she led PE like it was a core subject. And my heart sang at that for two reasons. One,
amazing.
She's really a leader, but she didn't kind of go, oh, it's only PE. Well, I'm not saying people do that. I know PE coordinates passionate, but she led it at a level that she clearly, I mean, like a core subject, like you were going to be tested on it and people are going to scrutinise it to the nth degree. I just thought,
amazing.
You did that in every subject. Brilliant. but great that it was PE because it is so important.
That's amazing. I was going to ask one more question, Sonia, but I don't think I will. I think I'm going to leave it on that note, on such positivity about PE. I don't think if I take it away from PE now, I don't think I'm ever going to get that quote again. I'm going to definitely put on some emails that get sent out. So I guess the last thing for me is just to say a huge thank you. It's been really good to speak to you again. And is there any questions you got for me or anything you want to add? Actually, get your books up again.
So I was going to say thank you so much for having me. Sorry, yes, I brought them up. I was talking to another head earlier, and she kind of came up. Okay, look, I've got your books beside me, and I thought, oh, I never bring my books onto things. So difficult conversations. If check out the reviews, and I'm really proud that there've been a lot of really good Twitter comments. In fact, I just contributed to an article for TES, and they'd heard about it, so that will help you if you've got a difficult conversation. But there are free resources on the website as well. And
amazing.
Thinking about how do we break the glass ceiling of good, then Journey to Outstanding helps with that as well. So these are my books. Planning on writing a third over the summer.
Oh, amazing. Get you. What I'll do, Sonia, as well, is I will, when I send an email out to all of our list, I'll link it into the list, but I'll also put the link into your book in the comments as well after this chat. And other than that, yeah, again, once again, thank you so much, and hope to catch up with you soon.
Yeah, lovely to see you, and thank you for having me, and keep doing all the fabulous work you're doing on PE, because
thank you.
Yeah, it is really important, and I'm a big fan of specialists coming in to do PE. I say that
good.
I was a bad PE teacher, and I hated that because I felt like I let my children down. So I love that. I love it when schools get experts in to teach subjects that you're not all going to be perfect at.
Absolutely. And actually, on that point, and I will finish on this point, I promise, we've got a webinar on Wednesday evening on coaching companies. As you know, one of our businesses is a coaching company, but it's basically to help schools to get the best provision possible, because I'm completely with you. I think there's a place, and I think teachers should deliver PE, but I also think there's a place for a specialist as well, so that the children get that high quality PE for 1 hour a week, if not more. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how many we get on that webinar. We've already got 40, I think, booked on. So yes, very important.
Yeah, no, it is. And in primary, your teacher starts breadth of subjects. Why not get someone in who? There are lots of benefits. I know lots of schools do, and I think it's a really good move, personally, from my point of view.
Well, great. What a lovely endorsement. Thank you, Sonia. I'll speak to you soon. Thank you. Take care. Bye.